anyway, so I did a good amount of research into canola oil because
Yeah.
we hear about oils and there's a lot of controversy whether or not some oils are better for you than others. Um, so I just kind of took a little bit of a deep dive into canola oil, and it was interesting. So I'll speak a little bit about it
Hmm.
from my research. So it's actually from what's called the rapeseed plant, and they produce these small little seeds. Um,
Hmm.
and then canola oil is actually rapeseed that's grown in Canada, so canola. Um,
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
the 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 problem though with these rapeseed seeds or plants is that they contain something called urusic acid. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but this urusic acid can actually be damaging to cardiac muscle in animals and is actually limited by the government in the United States and I think other nations. But when this Canada hybrid is able to grow it with limited urusic acid, which is why they're able to sell it
Hmm.
for consumption.
Okay.
And these rape seeds are actually also used for fuel and other products as well. So it's interesting. It has is a wide array of functions and what it's sold for. Now,
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
so they do have good when it comes to vitamins. They contain vitamins E and K, but there's really no other nutrition. So it's just two
Hmm.
simple vitamins, right? So right away, when you compare that to like a whole food, when you eat like a whole food, you're typically getting a nice diverse array of many different types of vitamins and nutrients.
Right.
We're just kind of um, from this, not too much. And then when it comes to the types of fats, the omega sixes and omega threes, the omega
Hmm.
sixes are, I think, uh,
Yeah.
the saturated
So
fat.
those are,
Yeah,
and that's the ones that we want to be a little bit more mindful of in terms of consuming for like heart health and even like long-term brain health.
yeah.
So
So
a diet higher in omega sixes can be very damaging to the heart and brain versus omega threes, which we hear a lot about. Those are heart protective and brain protective as well.
yeah, so this was a decent ratio. I think that's why you said that. It was a 2-to-1 ratio of omega sixes to omega threes. So it's not so bad. Um, let's see here. So it just contained one omega-3 fat, though, because there are different omega-3 fats, the essential fatty acids that your body needs to get from their diet. There was just one.
Mm-hmm.
So now, when you are, the thing is also when with these oils, when you cook them at certain temperatures, they can also destroy these nutrients. So I would
Yes.
think it may have these nutritional touted benefits, but then when you cook these burgers, you may be destroying these what were important nutrients.
Yes. And there is some research out there that does suggest that cooking things at higher temp can actually change things on the inside. And that itself can have like different impacts on your body. Even, how some of the fats can drop. Like if you cook something over an open fire, even, and that fat drops on the fire and the smoke comes up, those chemicals that are released in the smoke can stick to the food. It gets wild, so like you're saying, heating it up can also do some weird things.
And then looking into now, this is when the environment comes into play, and this is why I like to always see where do these ingredients come from. So, and this is one of the
Mm-hmm.
biggest, I think, reasons for the movement of vegan and vegetarian is you want to make sure the environment is cared for. And
Yeah.
sometimes, though, ironically, when you are developing these processed products and you're growing these other crops, they can actually damage the environment, I think, in other ways as well. So this
Yeah.
crop I was looking into, and I would have to do more research to be honest, but it seems like it's a large like monocrop. It takes up a lot of area, and when they grow it, they put a lot of pesticides and chemicals on it to prevent animals and insects from destroying the plant, and that in turn
Yeah.
will will I think affect animals and the environment as well. Things that we don't think about. It's
Yeah.
indirect to these animals and the environment, but it has a price. And you have to think from a business
Yeah.
perspective. It's like, how do we get all of these ingredients as cheap as possible, and you have to do some things that are not always environmentally friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just think of like the runoff for all the pesticides, it gets into the water, and then that in and of itself is an issue because then you have to look at. I mean, some people don't. I'm sure they don't clean the water like we would want them to, but animals eat it or drink it, and just the runoff and how it spreads, and just and like you even said, like you're taking one chunk of land and you're just dedicating it to this one crop that can kind of only do very limited things. So
With a limited
very interesting.
nutritional panel as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I think I also came across that most of these rapeseed plants are GMO sources. Now, GMOs are controversial, whether they may
Yeah.
be damaging, to long-term human and environmental safety. We don't know.
Yeah.
But I remain skeptical because, I mean, we don't know. And most of these are GMO sources.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
GMOs
that's
are
right.
also produced because and I can be mistaken, but the reason you produce them is because then you can add on to them pesticides and herbicides that would not damage the plant because of their genetic makeup. So you could throw in pesticides onto it and it could handle it.
Yeah, no, and that's part of it. It's just saying like, okay, we know that this strand and this strand together can make like a more of like a super crop, if you will, and then they can treat it differently. And I also think too, it's our population is ever growing, and if we had to somehow produce more with less, how can we do it? So you're right, though. We don't really know if GMO products have any kind of effect on us long term or the environment. It's pretty new. So they're really still looking at it, and there's a lot of controversy around it still.
And then getting into what's called expeller press. So just the fact, it always just even troubles me that you have to dive so deep into these process ingredients because there's so many different aspects to it. And it's just not simple, which is always a red flag to me. But regardless, so there's different types of ways to extract this oil from the seed. One of these ways is expeller pressed, and this seems to be a better way in that it's essentially pushed through like a filter, and there's no chemicals used to extract more of this oil. However, I'm not sure that they still may be able to use chemicals. So essentially, what happens with these seeds is you put these seeds onto something, and I think mechanically they crush the seeds and the oils drip out from these seeds, and that's how you extract oil. Now, thinking from a business perspective, it's like, how do we get the most oil out of the seeds that we have? I mean, it makes sense. Nothing wrong with that. And then there's other ways to extract even more oil out of that mush of seeds, and they tend to use gases like hexane. I looked into hexane can then like solvents can then remove more of that oil from those seeds, and that can be found. And then you have to like bleach it and add other things to it in order to extract as much oil as possible, and that can be harmful to your health, I think, as well.
Yeah. I mean, and again, those are things that you just don't think of. Like you hear expeller and I'm like, or expeller press. And I'm like, oh, they just squish it between two things. And like the oil comes out, like you said. But then you really don't think about all the other stuff because I mean, that's not listed on the label.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be because it's not an ingredient, but it's still part of the processing.
Exactly.